evening. I'm Norman Robinson, and welcome, as always, to Affordable Housing Matters. The city of New Orleans has recently implemented sweeps of homelessness encampments in the city. Colder weather, as you know, has made it hard for people who do not have homes or adequate housing. In addition, the housing holidays are coming up, and that will soon have a number of major significant events, including the All-State Sugar Bowl and the Super Bowl 59. And here tonight to discuss all of these topics and more is Ms. Andreanecia Morris, Executive Director of Housing NOLA and President of the Greater New Orleans Alliance. Welcome back, Ms. Morris. It's always nice to have you here.
Thank you, Norman. Thank you for having me.
Because I know we're going to get an earful.
Yes. There's a lot to talk about.
That's never a problem. And definitely we have a lot to talk about. It seems to be that homelessness has grabbed the top slot in the conversation about what's happening in the city of New Orleans. What's going on with these homelessness sweeps?
So the state of Louisiana, the governor specifically, Governor Jeff Landry, has taken an extraordinary step in advance of tourism events to come out and shuffle the unhoused around unceremoniously, seemingly trying to just move them out of the way, as opposed to, I don't know, making sure that they actually have housing. If you accept that homelessness is a part of a housing crisis, if being unhoused is a result of a failure of our housing, our local housing market to house you, provide you with housing that you can afford, that's sustainable, these attacks on the homeless are just unfathomable and really, really problematic. And in fact, they're interrupting, the governor has been interrupting processes that have been put in place by the state, by the city, by the local nonprofits to find housing, by local landlords who realize that there is a way of threading the needle and making sure that their business of providing housing can meet the needs of some of our most vulnerable neighbors.
According to the governor's office, though, these efforts or these steps that have been put in place are not moving fast enough. And so he's become frustrated. Right,
but what he's doing is interrupting a process that he thinks isn't moving fast enough. And I would argue, well, what you doing to fix it? How does this fix that? Because what they're doing is just unceremoniously picking people up and moving them somewhere else out of someone's specific line of sight, be it a Taylor Swift fan,
yes,
or a fan of the Bayou Classic. The governor isn't housing them. The governor isn't helping them. The governor's just trying to move them out of the way, and doing so in a way that's incredibly disrespectful. I mean, having wildlife and fishery agents, who I think would have something better to do, armed with weapons, treating our neighbors as if they're animals to be relocated and shoved into another cage.
And then throwing away their possessions.
And that's, that's been an outrage. We had on, I spoke to William Most, one of the lawyers who's been representing the unhoused folks in their fights against what the governor is doing, and they finally got granted a TRO that, there was a TRO granted, and now it's been a permanent injunction put in place that says simply that the governor is going to have to respect the process. So again, this moving quickly, this moving rapidly with this gross disregard for people isn't how you solve these problems. And the governor's been pushed back into his corner.
Well, apparently a lot of people have this discussion, especially people who own businesses and homes near encampments, about the problem that residents of the encampments are causing.
Right.
The litter, the drugs, the prostitution.
Yep, the challenges.
Yeah, and apparently the governor is reacting to those kind of complaints. Is he wrong?
Yes, because he's still not helping it. Are you solving the problem, or are you moving the problem out of the way, or are you making problems for someone else? Because we all live here. There's a corner of the city that you're going to shove them into that won't have an impact, when you could actually solve the problem and house them. So it's wrong to respond in such a short-sighted way. It's wrong to respond in such a narrow, hateful way. No one wants to see the the results of our failures as a community. But I would rather, and I think most people would rather we solve the problem than trying to sweep it under the rug.
And so you think that the approach the governor has taken is just sweeping it under the rug?
That's it. They're moving folks, and actually making things worse. The places that they're relocating them, first of all, because they're not housing them. They're not coming in and saying, we've got somewhere for you to go.
So they're just moving the problem.
They're moving the problem somewhere else, and the places that they're moving them to have even worse conditions. There's no restroom facilities. There's no porta potties. There's no access to running water. There's no access to any of the things that would make the unenviable proposition of someone else be better.
Would that be a better process if the governor were to provide a place with these kind of amenities so that people could be accommodated in a more civilized and humane way?
And what would be really better is if we just help create more housing opportunities and move them there. We could talk about rental assistance. We could talk about relocation assistance. We could talk about hotel vouchers. We could talk.
But again, that's a that's a timely process.
Not really.
No.
Not really. I got to remind you, we have a 21% vacancy rate in the city of New Orleans.
Really?
Of occupiable homes.
Of occupiable homes.
Occupiable homes. That's not counting the blighted and abandoned and vacant land. We have even more of that. But when you talk about homes and apartments that are sitting vacant right now because they're overpriced.
So how would we get people into those homes?
Money. That's not a time problem. That's a money problem.
That's a money problem.
That's a money problem. That's a money problem. And that's what the folks who are working at the city's Office of Homelessness, Mayor, Councilwoman Harris's plan around Home for Good, those campaigns are actually trying to increase the amount of money that they have. What Unity is doing, they're trying to get more money into the system to find landlords who are willing to rent to the unhoused and get them housed. There does take time to get folks ready when you don't have all of the money you need, right? Because if you've got to help someone access their Social Security, access their benefits, that takes time. But if you got a pot of cash that says, we're gonna house you tonight while we work 2 to 3 months to get through those systems so that you can then pay your own rent.
Well, this is the way Council Chairwoman Helena Moreno put it when she had an interview with WWL Television, I believe.
Yep.
She said that she was kind of dissatisfied with the lack of urgency with the millions of dollars coming in. So how do you respond to that?
That's an unfair assessment, I think.
Why do you say that?
We push back on our council member partners all the time about the fact that when it comes to housing, they all need to be spending more time reviewing the budget and understanding the process.
So she's not understanding the process, is what you're saying?
They're not deploying enough dollars towards it, and it does take time to move some of these more complicated, these federal dollars do take time. You need some more unrestricted dollars that can move faster. It's how the dollars actually move and what their time limits are, and you've got to understand that. And we do have gaps in the system. The more flexible money, rapid rehousing dollars that rapidly rehouse people, those are dollars that we don't have a lot of in the system.
So for the viewers who don't understand what's happening when they pass by these encampments and they see people and they wonder why they're there and not being housed, what is the process that they need to understand so that they have a better appreciation of what's going on?
So one part of the process is you've got to build trust with folks who are, particularly folks who are struggling with mental illness and other issues. Those folks take time, but there are folks out there who are unhoused, who have been recently unhoused, who have been evicted or foreclosed upon, have found themselves, and we need to be able to go out there and help those folks as quickly as possible. And we just don't have the dollars for that, because one thing most people don't understand is in order, for example, Unity to access someone who's street homeless, you have to be street homeless a year.
Really?
Yes.
So you just can't go out and help somebody
because
who just shows up?
Because we don't have the rapid rehousing dollars that would help the folks who are more recently homeless and would be easier to help because they just came from a housing situation, they were unstable, and they could go back in relatively quickly. They have a job, they have family support, they just weren't able to keep things going. The spinning plates crashed on them. So the money that Unity and the other homeless providers have, most of the federal dollars are designed for the hardest to house. But the low-hanging fruit, if you will, we don't have enough money for them. We don't have enough resources for them. We have enough housing for them.
But we don't have the resources.
The resources to have everything from case managers to help those folks find a home quickly, to pay the deposits, to help them with utilities. That's another area where we also have gaps in the system. Where
where do the case managers fit into this process? I hear people talk about case managers all the time. We have to have case managers go out to assess.
That's right.
Every homeless person.
Right, so that's another place where we have a misalignment. So you have a lot of really amazing programs out there, like who do case management service, from Daughters of Charity to the Metropolitan. There are people who do the services. They don't have access to housing. So you have people who are disconnected. It's not as seamless system as we need it to be. Those folks will go out there, they have resources to provide the case management services. Heck, you've got case managers in our schools to help children who are unhoused, children who are doubled up. The thousands of school-aged children who are housing insecure or homeless, those case managers can't find housing, and they can't find funding to house those folks. If immediately, like you have case managers right now, but they're disconnected from money and housing opportunities. So we have a fractured system that needs to be better knitted, that needs to be better connected.
How do we do that? I mean, it sounds like you're explaining a system that is discombobulated.
Yes, it is.
And disjointed and complicated beyond measure. And it's almost dysfunctional at no fault of their own, because there's no So how do we fix that?
Investment. Some of the dollars that we need to be seeing is going to help fix that, because you're going to close some of those gaps very naturally. You're going to say, hey, if we've got rental assistance money, if we've got dollars to build housing opportunities, and we're talking about how we line these things up and we connect them to lawyers, to case managers, to folks who have people who could go into those housing, that's how we make this work.
And when you talk about the 21,000, 21% of the housing being available, are they suitable
yes.
habitats?
Yes. Oh, yes. No, we're talking about many of them are highly suitable. They're overpriced. They're wildly overpriced. So you have some that are out of reach for the average New Orleanians. So that's also part of this, is that it doesn't have to be just focused on those individuals. We do need to be looking at stabilizing people in other places. So you've got folks who are working class folks, middle class folks, who are in neighborhoods, who are in homes that they really shouldn't be in. Like, for example, one big problem that we have is that we have a lot of singles, young professionals who are in roommate situations in homes intended for families, because they can't find housing inside of their price range in the neighborhoods they'd like to be in. So you've got 3 young people making $50,000, $60,000 a year in a house, in a neighborhood, renting a 3-bedroom house, and renting it in a way where they're driving the rental market, because they can afford to pay $500, $600, $700. So you're looking at a house that's $1,500, $2,100. That's out of reach for a family.
What about those houses that are? I don't want the viewers to think that I'm just trying to be sensational. I mean, we do have an unhealthy situation when it comes to some houses.
The slumlords, the slumlords, the number of slumlords that we have out there. Those are folks who are taking advantage of the people who can only pay so much. They're charging rent. They're charging $200, $300, $400 a month for people, and giving them nothing. But they can't find. That's why you got to have some of the dollars available to close the gap. You got to have more vouchers. You've got to have more rental assistance. So someone who can afford to pay $200 a month, they deserve somewhere to live.
So do you have a program for that? I mean, for Healthy Homes?
Healthy Homes is also a big part of that, the city's Healthy Homes program. But it's also missing gap, and that's another area where we would put this on the city council. The Healthy Homes program does not have a relocation program. So if you go to shut down a development or a multifamily,
like the Willows apartments in the New Orleans East, that's just totally disgusting.
You could shut it down tomorrow. Where are the folks going to go? You're going to create dozens of new unhoused folks. We just talked about the fact that we don't have a system to rapidly rehouse those people. So we need a relocation program that says we're going to help you find somewhere to live right? We're gonna there's actually apartments across the street from the Willows that have vacancies.
Really?
Yes.
And
But
you can't get people moved into those?
they don't have the money. They're paying rent at the Willows. They can't afford to rent the place across the street. You've got to close the gap. We've got to, that's part of this, is that a lot of our policymakers are refusing to own their part in this, that they're not investing. I mean, again, the city just closed out its budget and did not put a nickel into the relocation budget for the Healthy Homes program. Now, this was after.
They didn't put any money into the relocation budget?
Nope.
Well, then how are you going to solve the problem if you don't have the money?
Exactly. And this has been, and the Healthy Homes program has been slow to get off the ground, partly because of this kind of inconsistency at the council level and at the mayor's level to make sure that the budget's been appropriate. It was only last year that we got the staffing fully funded.
So
Like the first year of the Healthy Homes program, they had exactly $0 to pay anyone to run the program. Last year was the first year they fully funded the staffing requests to hire people to actually run the program. Now we have enough people, they're running the program, but they are missing critical parts of their budget, their relocation dollars. It's been zero.
Okay, so that's, we have the automobile, we've got the tires, we just don't have the engine.
Right, that's right. That's right. And the engine's sitting over there. They're like, not only do we have the engines over there, it's like, can you put it in? We got to pay somebody to put it in. And then somebody needs to go get the gas, too. And all of these things are possible. All of these things are absolutely on the table. It's not, and this is where I think our leaders fall down a lot, and it's why we've seen the failing grades with the Housing NOLA plan for the last few years, is that there's so many of our leaders who think that this is impossible, and they don't want to look at their culpability. They'd rather say, well, this is not this, and it comes down to part of the reason it's so troubling. And I'm so glad that you talked about the unhoused first, is that what we end up doing is othering folks. We end up going, well, they're drug addicts, or they're single moms who don't want any better for themselves, and they create crime. And we start saying how it's somehow the people's fault that you got the engine sitting over there. Well, the folks are sitting in the back of the car. And the engine's over there, and they're not mechanics. The engine is also locked up. They don't have the keys to go get it. It's saying, hey, you shouldn't, instead of sitting in the car, you should be going over there and figuring out how to break into that and then drag the engine over yourself, and then you'll be worthy of our assistance.
So we have all these, let me get this straight, we have all these lofty ideas about programs to help, but we don't have the basic fundamentals.
Correct.
So Ms. Morris, how do we?
But we're moving in that direction, thankfully.
We're moving in that direction.
Yes. So because one of the things that has to happen is community has got to get in the game and say very clearly to our elected officials and those policymakers, you need to do this correctly. Instead of neighbors doing, and those business leaders sitting there going and said, I just want you to get these people out of my sight.
That's the attitude. I just want them moved away.
Yeah, they need to say,
they're disturbing my environment.
Hey, Governor, you're actually part of the problem. Do your job better. Don't go get people who are unrelated to this. Like, why are you pulling wildlife and game officers into this? They don't have something else to do? The people who they're failing to serve should be saying, hey, why are you working on this in New Orleans when they should be out here helping us with our alligator tags or whatever it is that they do every day? That is actually needed, a part of our system. Same thing at the local level. What are our Healthy Homes officials and administrators doing, and how do they have everything that they need? And yes, you're going to have mistakes. You're going to have people who mess up. But let's start with, did you have everything that you needed? Did we give you everything that you needed? And then say, well, how can you do it better? But if we're going to sit here and go, the Willows should just go away, and we're going to, and because what you're saying is what a lot of our policymakers are saying when they go there is they want the people gone, because they think it's the people's fault. That, hey, there's empty apartments across the street. Why don't you figure out how to go across the street and go get one of those apartments? And they're like, I'm living where I'm living, I'm paying rent where I'm paying rent because that's what I can afford. And they deserve better than that. We should not be allowing people to take advantage of them.
So what Ms. Morris, what do you say to the ordinary citizen who's a law-abiding, tax-paying citizen, watching all of the money that's coming in, saying that, where are all of these millions and millions of dollars going if we have people piled up on the street?
Right. I mean, I think they would say the first question is it enough? Are the millions and millions of dollars that are coming in, is it in fact enough to address these issues? And where is the money going? That's one of the things that we do at Housing NOLA. That's one of the things that we monitor where the money is going. We talk about where the shortfalls are. And sometimes the dollars aren't going where we intend.
Really?
Yes.
Explain that.
Like, we spend a lot of money, especially after a disaster. There's a lot of money going to consultants who can help us run these programs to avoid fraud, waste, and abuse. And oftentimes those folks are more focused on keeping the money away from individuals. Anyone who's lived here long enough to have experienced any disaster knows what I'm talking about, knows how did the Road Home program, which had billions of dollars, what went awry? And it wasn't that we didn't have enough money, it was that we didn't have the will to invest in who needed it. We allowed our policymakers to design a program that failed the very people who was intended to serve. Look at the lower Ninth Ward. Look at the lower Ninth Ward.
I've been there.
And think about the fact that there was money allocated, $150,000 was allocated by Congress for every homeowner who was impacted by Katrina. Those folks didn't get $150,000. And that was because of bad program design, as we continue to push on that, and we don't go back and fix those mistakes. So we've got to make sure as we move forward, as we have new dollars coming in, as we have new programs coming in, we got new bites at the apple. There's more money coming.
So how do we keep up as much as we're behind on meeting the needs and coming up with the programs and coming up with the money and staff to run the programs needed? How do we deal with things like climate change that changes the equation for everybody?
Well, but we see those as opportunities because they will bring in other resources. So with climate change, you're talking about the fact that you're going to have more climate intensified hurricanes. You're going to have energy bills that are going to swing wildly. Louisiana is no longer a place where folks can breathe a sigh of relief after 2 to 3 months of sky-high electric bills in the summer. You can start, my bill's going to drop down in October, November, December, and January, and February, and then you start inking it back up as you start turning your AC on. No, because now we're having weather swings in the other direction. We're seeing heat, we're seeing cold come in, more freeze warnings. It's just colder, so you're having to run the space heaters, you're having to run your gas heaters in your homes, and we're seeing people with utility bills that are almost as high in the winter as they have in the summer. So that's a result of climate change. So we've got to start talking again about how do we invest in renewables, how do we make our homes more energy efficient.
How does, people might be wondering, well, how does that affect homelessness or affordable housing?
Well, it makes your home more unaffordable. So people get evicted for a lot of reasons, especially if you're on a subsidized housing program. Most people don't know this, is if you have a voucher, a Section 8 voucher, and you can't keep your utilities on, that's grounds for program termination. So
really?
Yes. So you may say, okay, let me pay my landlord, and I'm not going to pay the utility company because it's winter, the house is not very energy efficient, and I got through the summer, but now I can't get through these winters, and my lights get cut off. If your lights are cut off for more than 14 days, that's grounds for you. Yes.
There is such a policy.
Yes. So that if someone who needs help paying their rent can't pay their utilities for a certain amount of time, that means that they will lose that rental assistance and become homeless.
So
yes, so we've some of this we've set people up to fail, and we're not owning that. We're not acknowledging that. When you talk about the unhoused, someone who may have been evicted, found themselves homeless, they have a debt to Entergy, so they come back and someone has rental assistance for them. We're going to help you find an apartment. We found you an apartment. And then they go to Entergy to go turn their lights on, and Entergy is saying, hey, you got
an outstanding bill.
You got an outstanding bill. And now we have to find the money to close that gap as well.
So this is why a lot of people find themselves in homeless encampments?
Yes. Oh, yes. And for longer. Right? For longer than, here's a vacant house right now, here's some of the resources, and we start tripping the wires, and we don't have resources to address those things. We don't have programs to address those things. And so that's why sometimes it takes longer. That's why a wildlife and fishery agent with a gun is not the answer. that is not the answer, because they are not solving the problem, and it's not folks' intractability, it's not folks' unwillingness, it's not folks choosing to remain under the bridge. It is the system pushing back against them, and we've got to clear the road. We've got to clear these paths. And we've got to do so with the application of resources and the belief that we can solve this problem, that we must.
So we have to start looking at this as a serious problem that warrants merit.
Correct.
And instead of looking at people who happen to be homeless as ne'er-do-wells.
Correct.
Which is the historical
That's right.
perspective.
I mean, it's one of the things that's really weird about particularly some of the neighbors who I understand it. I totally understand the frustration. I had a conversation with one of our policymakers who told us about hearing from a constituent whose young daughter saw an unhoused person unclothed.
Yeah, I've had those stories.
Right, but one thing that was interesting about that story was I was like, well, what happened? Well, the person was trying to clean up, and the daughter looked out, the young daughter looked out and saw this homeless person trying to clean themselves, and that person was naked. And I said, well, can we talk about the fact that that person was trying to get clean? And what they need is a bathroom.
Yeah.
Can we, as horrifying as it is for a young child to see a naked man outside, can we get clear about the fact that what's really wrong is that person he was trying to get clean.
Yeah. We have a lot to discuss, and we can't get it all done in this one show. We're going to do another show with you.
Okay, we'll be back.
And in that show, we're going to discuss the Housing Trust Fund, the home ownership opportunities for people, and of course the bugaboo that's affecting everybody is insurance.
Yes,
all right.
That's right.
But thank you for your discussion on this homeless
Thank
situation. Cleared up a lot for us.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And that will conclude our episode for this evening with so much more to be discussed and information to cover concerning affordable housing. We will have Ms. Andreanecia Morris return next month to address more issues that are affecting our community. Also, if you missed any episode, don't worry. Just click on the QR code on the screen, and it will take you directly to our WLAE-TV YouTube page, where you can view all of our programs at your leisure. I'm Norman Robinson, and we will see you next time right here on Affordable Housing Matters.